everybody, and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode, we're walking in Memphis. And the topic of this Walking in Memphis, CWA Memphis Wrestling from April 4th, 1981. This is the oldest of these that I've reviewed so far. Pretty excited about it. We'll get into that in a moment here. If you haven't seen these, this is where we're going to review Memphis wrestling TV shows that you can actually find on YouTube. There's going to be a link in the description here if you want to watch a specific episode. So pause right here, watch the episode, come back and listen to the review, or listen to the review and then go and watch it if you don't care about spoilers. These all come to us from a recommendation from a good friend, the American Samurai Bucky749. His YouTube page will also be there in the description. To check him out, I highly recommend that as well. With that being said, we grade everything here on a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Jumping right in, the first match of the evening, The Angel with Jimmy Hart versus The Dream Machine. And this was really cool because Dream Machine is one of those very underrated, and if you didn't watch Memphis wrestling, you probably never caught his work. Dream Machine was, the best way I can explain it is he was almost like Dusty Rhodes, but a little bit different. He worked better as a heel than Dusty, so he was like if you mix Dusty Rhodes, I want to say with like a Dr. Death David Schultz, you would kind of get what the Dream Machine was. He was extremely charismatic and a really fun wrestler to watch. The Angel, Frank Morrell, obviously a legend of wrestling. People have heard, I'm sure you've heard his name if you don't know who he is in the past. This was a good opener. A little bit prodding at times, but trying to watch something from 1981 and 2022, the style of wrestling has changed so much that going back and watching this, sometimes it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it should. I'm sure at the time this would have, as the kids say, hit much better. But it was a good opener either way. Dream Machine picks up the win here after Jimmy Hart comes in and hits him with a cane. I'm giving this one a 3, and obviously that caused a DQ. I'm giving this a 3. Thought it was a good opener. I've seen better from both guys. I really enjoy the Dream Machine's work. And what we're going to talk about next is somewhat an example, but a kind of bad example. After that, we come back, we get a local promo promoting the upcoming card with Dream Machine and Bill Dundee talking about a match they're about to have with Masafuchi and Atsushi Onita, who are at this point managed by Tojo Yamamoto. This is a really good promo. It shows Dream Machine's talking skill, and of course Bill Dundee is a good promo as well. Dundee, we're going to leave out because he doesn't cross over. However, there is some really questionable racist terminology in this promo. And it's all by Dream Machine. And I'm not excusing the language. I'm not saying it wasn't bad, even for the time. But I feel like, and I'm not trying to be an apologist here. I just feel like in the early 80s that this is how most of America talked about Japanese people. Doesn't make it right. Doesn't make it less terrible when you hear it. But I kind of feel like it didn't have those connotations then that it does now. And I don't know the Dream Machine personally. There really isn't a ton of information out there on him. The most you're going to hear about him is every now and again Jim Cornette brings him up on his podcast. I believe Ron Fuller's brought him up on his podcast. But I haven't seen a real deep dive. And American Samurai, and I know you're probably going to watch this, if you know where there's a documentary style thing about the Dream Machine, I would love to hear it, whether it be a book or a video or maybe, I don't think he ever did a shoot interview, so, but if you do know of something that gives a little bit more history on him, I'd really love to know about that, so hit me up. I know you'll hit me up down here either way. Hit me up down in the comments, let me know. But again, shows how good he is in a promo, even though some of the terminology used is quite bad. Coming from that, and you got to remember too, a lot of the gimmicks here at the time frame were very stereotypical. Japanese wrestlers acted one way, Russian wrestlers acted one way, foreign menaces were always bad. So I think it's more of a product of the time than what the man actually feels. Next up, we get a promo in studio with Masafuchi and Atsushi Onita and Tojo Yamamoto. Love seeing this because Fuchi and Onita, again, two absolute legends in wrestling. Tojo as well. Tojo, it's a shame that most of Tojo's career happened before everything was recorded, everything, tapes were saved, because Tojo, I think, you would know more about, and he would have more of an impact on wrestling if there was more video of him out there. I digress. Tojo at the time was being managed by Jimmy Hart, where Jimmy Hart says he'd like to manage Fuchi and Onita. But Tojo says, Jimmy, you don't speak Japanese, you don't understand the culture, I'm going to take care of managing these guys. I love seeing Onita. This is pre-injury Onita, so he's still juniors Onita here. And Fuchi, who's also great in All Japan during this decade and into the 90s. I think he even went into the 2000s. I want to say into the late 2000, like 2008, 2009 was when he really stopped. Just really cool to see two legends this young in their career, and you could definitely see when Onita went to Excursion in America, and it's well documented that he said this as well. He took a lot of the Memphis style and brought it back when he made FMW. FMW did take it a little bit further, but you could see Memphis style booking in FMW. Even if the matches were way crazier, you see where the Memphis booking influenced it. And that's another thing that I don't think gets recognized a lot. Memphis booking and style influenced ECW. It influenced FMW. Now, did they take it and go a little bit more extreme, more on the hardcore side? They definitely did. But if you look at the booking and the storylines of both companies, it's very much rooted in what they did in Memphis. And if you look at it, early on in his career, Paul Heyman spent time in Memphis. Early on in his career, Atsushi Onita spent time in Memphis. So it's obvious where these influences come from. And it's kind of awesome how it spread and it became a worldwide thing. Now, coming off of that promo, we get Tom Maley versus Dutch Mantel. I've said it, if you watched a few of these, Dutch is one of my favorite Memphis wrestlers, probably my favorite of the Memphis-centric wrestlers. I really love Dutch. I love his work. This was a really solid match, even though it was pretty much, you knew it was going to be a squash. Dutch picks up the win here. I'm giving this a 4. Afterwards, we get a Jerry the King Lawler promo, which leads us into a match with Gypsy Joe versus Jerry Lawler. And if you only know Gypsy Joe, most newer wrestling fans only know him from the New Jack incident. But Gypsy Joe was a guy that's been around, or had been around for years and years, even at this point. Joe was an older wrestler, and even watching it back at this time frame, I didn't see much of this era, the 81 era, or before, but after like the mid-80s era, seeing Gypsy Joe, even then, it felt like, who's this old guy in the ring? So Fast forward that 20 years, and he's ancient against New Jack. But anyway, Gypsy Joe and Jerry Lawler wrestling here. Gypsy's Joe's managed by Jimmy Hart. Whenever Lawler wasn't affiliated with Hart, he was going up against Hart. In Hart's first family, at this point it was dwindled down to just Gypsy Joe and the Angel, which fittingly fits into this because the Angel gets involved. Jerry Lawler picks up the win here by DQ, runs off all three men because he's Jerry Lawler and this is Memphis, and Jerry Lawler in Memphis is the equivalent of John Cena in the Ruthless Aggression era. He's the equivalent of Hulk Hogan in the Rock and Wrestling era. He's the equivalent of Goldberg in late WCW. Jerry Lawler is the penultimate wrestler. He's the guy. And there's fabulous reason for that. Not only is he a great wrestler, one of the top wrestlers of all time, he's one of the greatest talkers of all time, too. So he has both of those things going for him, and a fantastic mind for booking. Lawler picked up the win here by DQ. I'm giving it a 5. Anything that has Lawler in it most likely is going to get a 5. His psychology is among the greatest of all time, and a lot of people rank him as the greatest in-ring psychologist of all time. Now, coming from that, we get to see a video of a Coliseum show. We see Terry Funk versus Jerry Lawler, and it's highlights of their match. And even with it just being highlights in about 5 minutes of what seemed to be about a 20-minute match, seeing Terry Funk, one of my what I consider one of the two greatest wrestlers of all time, him and Ric Flair, versus Jerry Lawler, a guy that I would definitely put in the top 10. This was just amazing. It was amazing seeing these two interact, and I've seen stuff with the two interacting before, but anytime you get to see it, much like I said with Lawler, it's always going to be a highlight. Jerry Lawler picks up the win by a count out here. I'm giving this segment a 5. I thought it was fantastic. Like I said, how can you not love Terry Funk and Jerry Lawler? It's just two of the greats that ever did it. Next up, we have a very young Eddie Gilbert teaming with Vinnie Romeo, who I know better and you may know better as Vinnie Valentino. Wow, that's hard to say. And they're going up against Masafuchi and Atsushi Onita. This is the main event of the evening, or main event of the show. Again, just another really good match. Eddie Gilbert wasn't what he would be much later on. This was him pretty much getting his start out. I want to say he started in the late 70s, so he wasn't really... He hadn't become what he would become later on, which would be Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, and another legend in Memphis, and another one of my favorite Memphis wrestlers. And here, he's not... I wouldn't say so much he's an enhancement talent, but he's a guy that's definitely lower on the card. Fuchi and Onita pick up the win here. I'm giving the segment a solid 4. Last but not least, we get promos for a local show from Jerry Lawler and Terry Funk. I said it just a few minutes ago. Lawler and Funk is always going to get a 5 from me. That gets a 5 to close out the show. With everything we had involved here, I'm going to give the whole show a 5. Very entertaining. The video quality isn't great on the video, but again, we're talking 41 years ago, and it is very obvious it was taped on video cassette because they're trying to get the tracking correct, and if you're old enough to remember video cassettes and tracking, you'll understand that. But the show itself is fantastic. I mean, we have absolute legends, and I almost called him Angelo Dundee. Superstar Bill Dundee, Atsushi Onita, Masafuchi, Tojo Yamamoto, Dutch Mantel, Jerry the King Lawler, Gypsy Joe, Terry Funk, Eddie Gilbert. The show is littered with absolute legends, and then local legends like the Angel and the Dream Machine as well. I mean, it's just a fantastic show. Over and over again, these shows do not disappoint. The wrestling in ring sometimes doesn't still hold up, but it holds up way better than any other promotion from the time period, and the overall storylines definitely hold up. You can run every one of these storylines, sans the quasi-racism, today, and they would still work, because they're just timeless. All that being said, just another fantastic show. I highly recommend you going and watching the video down here in the description. Please like the video, share this video, subscribe if you haven't, and if you made it all the way to the end, let's put FMW in the comments for Onita, and I appreciate you watching. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and we've been walking in Memphis.